advice?
You can ask anything.
Just
it's fine.
do a hand signal or something if you want me to shut up.
How am I enjoying the trip? You know, it's been something I've wanted to do for a long time. As far as when I came here in 2007, I came in by helicopter, and that was the right decision then. I had just had my youngest daughter, and I think emotionally it would have been way too difficult for me to hike. And I do a lot of hiking, but I've never done something of this duration. Usually the trails that I hike are pretty consistent. This one is far from that.
Yeah.
You know, nice and flat and soft, rocky, mud pits, walking through the rivers. That was very emotional for me when we crossed the Tech. I think you guys saw that. It was really emotional. And Jenna was right on my arm, and she could feel it, I could tell. So that was really hard. But it felt good. And but thinking about Chris being on the opposite side and having to turn around and it forever changing his fate, you know, that was tough. I mean, I would much rather we all be sitting around camping together with Chris and listening to his stories about travel than me telling you about the man that people don't know, you know. But I mean, I'm really enjoying the time. My feet are really wet and they're getting dry, and that's nice. But it's been good. I can't thank you guys enough for coming with me and being here and helping me get here. I couldn't have done it by myself, for sure.
Because you talked about your brother doing a lot of traveling, and of course he did this amazing adventure. But we were wondering, has that ever inspired you to do any, not something of that caliber, but going abroad or going off and just kind of enjoying other parts of the world other than where you're from?
Not specific to travel. I always, when I do lectures and I talk with people about Chris's story and John's book, I think that it's always important to see how everybody's connection is different. You know, there's so many ways that people identify with Chris's story, and it doesn't have to have anything to do with going out into the wild. It's about going outside of your comfort zone or pushing yourself in the direction that you know you want to go, but you haven't been able to get yourself there. And sometimes it's people that just want to leave a job that they're unhappy with, or they're in a relationship where they feel disrespected or trapped and they haven't gotten themselves out of it. So the biggest thing I learned from Chris, I always like to say, he taught me to honor each day. You know, life is such a huge gift. Chris loved life more than anyone I've ever known, and his entire life was the first half of mine, basically. He died at 24, and I'm 42 now, and so I've always felt like I was kind of living for him. He really never got to be an adult and never got to have children, and I think he taught me just to live, just appreciate every single day, more so than the cliche of appreciate every day. You know, every day is a gift. But I think he made me realize how important it is to be very self-aware of what you want to do with your life and what you can do through your life to be of service to others. You know, and I always talk to students about self-awareness versus selfishness. It's so important. Some people think Chris was very selfish for what he did, but I believe it was the exact opposite. You know, what he did was difficult and uncomfortable. But he knew it's what he had to do to be himself and solve some things that were going on within himself. And that way he could be, you know, a better man in any situation, whether it's a situation on his own or a relationship or an employee or anything. You know, from knowing him as I did, I believe that that's one of the reasons he did the things he did, and I know why he pushed himself as hard as he did, you know, because of our childhood, and he felt that he had a lot of things to prove, and he had a lot of things to work through. So, I mean, I think of him when I travel all the time, but it's more so of, if I know it's somewhere he hadn't been, I wish Chris could have seen it, or I wish that he was there with me. I wish I could share with him, but honestly, I feel like I am, so, yeah.
You talk about like self-discovery and understanding what your limits are. Did you ever because everyone knows Chris's story, but have you ever felt the need or the desire to do something similar to what Chris did? Maybe not as grand or adventurous, but something that's a little more outside of your comfort zone?
Sure, becoming a mom. You know, I mean, it's whatever going into your wild is, and for me, it was becoming a parent. Heather came into my life when she was 2, and she needed a mom, and I was afraid to be a parent because I was afraid that I would be abusive, and I didn't have any violent tendencies, and I didn't. I owned my own business, and my employees always remarked at how even-tempered I was. But one way I knew I would never be abusive to children is to not have kids. So when Heather came into my life, that was really going outside of my comfort zone and challenging myself to see if I could do that. And it's been the best gift ever. That was my, ultimate journey, the final odyssey. And, Chris would write really melodramatically. But that was the biggest challenge of my life, and it's been the best gift. It's been the absolute best opportunity that I have ever been handed. The scariest one, the best one, something that pushed me far outside of my comfort zone, but my life has never been better since. Heather taught me that I could be a mom, and I'm a really good one. I don't mind saying. So yeah.
Given the scale of this trip, the fact that we have 13 somewhat people coming out here, and just like the way this trail and this actual hike is perceived, how do you think your brother would feel about you coming out all the way out to the Stampede Trail, going to the bus?
There's a lot of things I could say about that. Chris used to always encourage people to hitchhike. And said that was the best thing to do, sleep in a tent on the side of the road, spend as little money as possible. But he would never advise his little sister to do that. He would have kicked my ass if I hitchhiked and slept in a tent on the side of the road. He would have been pissed. But I think that Chris I feel that he's really happy. I mean, did you see when I got here today and you guys were waiting while the rest of us came up? And I know I had to stop for a minute as soon as I saw the bus. And I've been here before, but coming by helicopter and then hiking 2 days of tough hike, and it's very different when you get here. And I came up from that direction by the helicopter. They landed down there at the Shoshana. And so coming up here was different. But I think, everyone's been, oh, thanks for letting me come on this trip. But I didn't let anyone do anything. I mean, I'm so grateful to all of you for being willing to come and help me get here safely. And I think that Chris would be very pleased. I know that he advised people to travel solo a lot, but I think he would be very happy that you all are here. And although I feel he would be with me on the trail if I was alone, I think he would be really worried. So I think this is better. And there's that saying where Chris wrote in a book, "Happiness only real when shared," and I have my own thoughts about that. And it's not always what everyone assumes, and that's fine. People send me tattoos where they have that on their body, and they ask me about what it meant for Chris, and I never speak for Chris. And so, unless it's something he told me directly or something he shared with me or something we experienced together. But I think the most important thing is what it means to them, those words. And so for me, this is something I would have wanted to do in a group, so I'm really happy to be here with friends and sharing it all with you guys. It's great. Yeah, so it feels good. Yeah.
So ultimately, because there is probably a slew of reasons why you would actually come out on this trip. I can count 10 easily for myself. But what would you say is your main motivation for doing this whole trip and actually deciding to do it by foot and come all the way out here?
I'm not sure. Part of me, first of all, I had a lot of trust in you guys and in Eric especially, and Jed, who's done the trip, and Mike, and all of you that live here and know this area and when it's safe to come. I had total confidence that if it wasn't safe to cross the Tech, that we wouldn't have crossed, and that the goal was to get home, not to get to the bus. So I think that part of me thought it was a little too risky, but with that in mind, knowing that I would stay safe. But even just flying all the way across the country and that far from my children, you know, you worry about being a responsible parent. I mean, what are you doing? But again, that's the difference of not coming and doing this by myself. I didn't feel like I had anything to prove. You know, Chris had some things he really needed to prove to himself, and I don't feel I had anything to prove to myself to do this. But, you know, I've been working on this book for 2 years with the incredible help of my editor, Jenna, and her being here with me. That was a huge motivation, you know, because it feels like we're at the end of this huge journey of telling the rest of Chris's story. And telling my story of how he's inspired me, and telling the story of our childhood that people don't know, that I think is very important. It can help a lot of people. And she reminded me today that when we were working on the proposal at her office in Seattle, we had planned to hike, and it didn't work out because everybody was so excited and wanted to get the proposal done, so we crammed in another day of work instead of a hike. And we felt kind of bummed about that. But here we are done, and we're doing this, you know, epic hike out here. So as we're both hiking on the trail, you know, with muddy boots and cramps. Might as well be real about it. You know, it's quite a culmination. So it sort of feels like a cleansing, I guess. Yeah.
And I know you said you don't speak for Chris, but using how well you've known him, what do you feel that in the last 21 years that he would be most surprised about the way people are, and just kind of like the way society is? Because a lot of people, I feel, got a very walled-in type opinion from both the book and the movie of the way he might have felt. But what do you think would be the biggest thing that he'd be surprised about?
That people make such a big deal about his life. I just, you know, Chris was the type of person that would not have thought that there was really anything about him that was remarkable. He was confident, but he didn't have a big ego. He was young and male, and he pushed himself to the limits, and you guys do those things when you're young and in your 20s. And, I mean, I've heard crazy stories from you guys that I'm surprised you're even alive. And, you know, the reason that people like, and I don't want to speak for John or Roman or people that, but from what I've read that they've said, or what I've heard John say in person, and people like David Brashears, I think, people that I respect, that I know are adventurers that have pushed themselves to the limits, I believe they have a respect for Chris because they remember when they were young and in their 20s and how many times they barely made it back. And, you know, I was saying on the trail the other day, the guys that climb Everest for the first time with no oxygen are crazy, but they make it down and they're, you know, heroes, you know. So you never know what you can achieve until you push yourself, and sometimes you make it and sometimes you don't. I think the reasons that Chris felt he needed to push himself were solvable. And I'm sad for him that that he was pushed into thinking that he had to push himself that hard. But I'm also pleased that he didn't die in vain. It's terrible that Chris died. It's again, like I said, I would much rather not have this story to talk about. But I think that it's healthy to talk about it, and I think that I think he'd be very surprised at how people. I think he wouldn't understand why people think he's remarkable. That's one of the things that's remarkable about people like that, is they don't think of themselves that way. They don't understand why everybody doesn't live that way, you know. So. I don't know. I don't think Chris would like the attention so much. But if the end cause of it was good and it was done with pure intent, which is what I'm trying to do, I think he'd be very pleased with what comes from it. I know when I work with students and they come up to me asking for help with what's going on in their household, when I talk about what went on in our household, I know that would make him happy. So.
And I guess with all of that, for people that may live in a bad household or have a bad relationship, or whether they find themselves being like Chris and having the need to prove something, what do you think would be the best advice that you could give someone who you felt like, if there was any advice you could give to Chris right now before his trip, what do you think he might have said?
Chris would not have taken any advice before his trip. Did you read the book?
Yeah.
I mean, when someone's that self-motivated and determined, Jim Gallion, a very experienced guy who lived here, was trying to talk him out the whole way down, Stampede Road, and dropped him off in cold and snow, and Chris wasn't deterred, so, and he wasn't going to listen to his little sister. I would just tell him I love him.
What if it was somebody like, sorry,
Yeah.
but I feel like maybe part of what it's getting at too is like those kids that come up to you after
Right.
lectures and they're like, this is going on.
Well, what I tell them is to talk to someone, find someone that they can talk to about it and get some help. But the biggest thing is learning how you can help yourself, and usually when they come up and talk to me, it's the first time they've opened up about it. So I always give them my card with my personal phone number on it, and I ask them to keep in touch, and I'll do anything I can to help them. But normally that's pairing them up with a teacher or someone there that, they just sort of want someone to know, but they didn't know it was okay to talk about it. So I think the biggest thing is just to know yourself and to be good to yourself. And it's not about being self-absorbed. It's about, being self-empowered and being able to do the best you can with your life. If you don't know yourself and you don't know what you need, you can't do that. You can't help anybody else either. So you go through your life being the person that you think you're supposed to be and not the person you want to be.
Well, I believe that is the summation of all of our questions.
Nice.
But I'm pretty sure, does anyone else possibly have any?
Yeah, you had said that you felt like Chris had a lot to prove. And I'm wondering what you mean by that exactly. If you meant that he had a lot to prove to himself, or he felt like he had a lot to prove to other people.
No, himself. And again, I won't speak for Chris, but I just remember from our childhood, Chris was always kind of made to feel that he wasn't worth a lot. So I think that when you're very young and you see things and you hear things, it becomes your normal. And then when you grow up and you realize that that's not what the normal should be, but you aren't allowed to talk about it, and it's something that's never dealt with. And I know that from my own experiences. You sort of have to find your own normal, And, Chris, I would always say, could be alone without being lonely, and that was true. But he was also very social. He had friends, and he enjoyed hanging out and being with people, but I think sometimes Chris just had to stop all the noise, so he could really listen to himself. And he journaled a lot, and he taught me to journal, and that's when some of my best work comes out of me, or my best thoughts come out, is when I'm doing that. And I think that he had a lot to settle within himself. And part of that is being young and male and seeing how far you can push yourself. And some of it is just the things that I feel haunted him in his head. But, Chris had, I think that sometimes some people think Chris is crazy, and I don't try to defend. I can tell you he was not. I'll be somewhere and people won't even know I'm his sister, but the book will be somewhere and someone will talk about it. or the movie, oh, that guy was crazy. And they'll go on and on. I said, when did you meet him? Oh, I never met him. So, well, how do you know he was crazy if you never met him? Because of what you discerned from a book or a movie, and you have to have your own experiences to make those decisions. Have you ever done anything he's done? Well, no. Have you ever been through anything he went through? Well, no. You know, so it's not a defense. It's just a matter of truth. That's what it is. So, yeah, I feel from what he said to me and the letters he wrote me before he left, you know, Chris just wanted peace. He wanted to stop the noise, and he wanted to just really experience things simply and figure out what life meant to him and what he wanted to do with his. And when you grow up in a tumultuous household, and then you go to school, and then you work your ass off and get great grades, and you get your degree, he was just ready for some me time, you know, and to figure that all out so he could do it. Chris didn't like to waste time. So I believe that he needed to really be thorough about who he was, what he wanted to do, and where he wanted to go next, you know, in his life, work, relationships, anything. And I think that too often people just go through the motions and they don't actually take the time to figure that out. So I think that he was very smart in doing that. And he clearly made some mistakes, and he pushed himself too far, and he didn't have all the experience that he needed. But your best lessons come from mistakes, and unfortunately sometimes they're detrimental or fatal, you know, and his was. So
If he was alive to this day, what do you think he would be doing with his life?
I have the same answer to that question every single time. I think he'd be just like John Krakauer. And I don't mean that. John blushes when I say that. And, you know, John is similar to Chris. They don't get how remarkable they are. He's a remarkable man. And by saying I think he'd be just like him, there's reasons I say that. When I spend time with John, I feel like I'm spending time with the Chris, the brother that I would have had. You know, not that we have a brother-sister relationship. He's just always been, ever since he first came to interview me, he's been a true friend with pure intent. And those are hard to come by. He doesn't always tell you what you want to hear. He's honest with everything he says. And, you know, to me, that's a real, true friend. And I think Chris would have been that for a lot of people. And, you know, unfortunately, in his death, he has done that and been that. When I went in today, when I got here, and I was saying that earlier, and you guys were sitting, and I had to stop, and then I started walking over. And did any of you notice how the sun kind of came out, and then this rain just started to fall right then? Or did I imagine that? I mean, it was right then. And I don't know, that was just powerful to me. I mean, Mother Nature, sure, but still, that was powerful to me. So, I don't know, I think that there's a real positive energy surrounding all of these things, and Chris in his death has done a lot of the things that I think he would have done in his life. I would much rather have him doing these things and making an impact on people's lives alive. And that's a selfish thing. I want him to be here for me, and I want him to know my kids. And, you know, my faith feels that he's in a better place, but I still want him here. But I think that he would be doing the kind of stuff John Krakauer did. You know, Chris was a good writer. He was an adventurer. I think that he would have made himself a career that allowed him to do the things he wanted to do in his life to make him happy. You know, and that the things that he was passionate about. So I think he would have been a writer or a teacher, like one of those cool professors that's always taking their students out on these like random crazy adventures. And I also think that maybe he would have been a journalist, like the kind that are always in these areas that they shouldn't be and they're getting arrested or something. Because he was never afraid to speak out, you know. and expose. Chris was never afraid to speak out or expose himself, maybe, but not any atrocities that he saw. That was even clear in high school.
Was that inspirational for you in writing this book?
Inspirational. That's probably a good question for Jenna for having me go through all that. Because there were some chapters that I would write and I would call her halfway through and I'm crying and it's just so hard. And she'd say, you've told me this story a bunch of times. Do you want me to draft it and send it to you, Dad? No, I have to do it myself. And there were some chapters that were really, really tough. And I would say at the end, those felt cleansing.
And they were the best ones, by the way.
Yeah, those are the ones that she really didn't have to edit. So the ones with the most tears, apparently, that works for me. But I think I already felt very inspired by Chris, so I don't think the book has changed that for me, but the hope that my book can inspire other people, that's inspiring to me. That's exciting to me. I feel very good with the end product, and I know that it's something that I did to honor truth and with pure intent. So if it sells, it sells. That'd be great, because it would provide a lot of opportunities and hopefully get a very important message out to people. If not, it's been a very healthy journaling exercise for me, and something wonderful for my kids to have. So.
Since doing this trip, do you feel like there's anything in your book that you would like to add or modify from your experiences here?
No, I mean, Jenna and I thought about one scene today that we had
Just forgotten about.
we have covered so much ground, but she's like, oh, we should have put that in there.
And we still might.
But we already figured out a place to put it. But I laugh because it's done. So the editors at Harper one might be like, no, but it's good. So I think we can, and she can get me to accomplish it in a couple sentences. I might write a page and she'll say, you just need this and this. So I feel like I've left nothing unsaid. And that was really tough to do after 20 plus years of leaving a lot unsaid. And I take responsibility for that. I take responsibility for the things that weren't in John's book and the things that weren't in Sean's film. There was a little more in Sean's film, but I really feel like Chris has never been fully honored. And I don't mean that like John didn't do a good enough job. He did an amazing job, and Sean did an incredible job. But, you know, I wouldn't let John tell the whole story because I was protecting my parents. And in a way, with this book, I almost feel like I'm finally relieving my parents. You know, I'm sure they won't see it that way, but in all honesty, to me, the truth is the most relieving thing, you know? And I just think Chris deserves it. You know, he deserves it. And all the people that are so inspired by him, the students that I work with, and when I work with them and I talk with them, it's like watching a bunch of light bulbs go off. You know, it doesn't matter if it's 60 kids or 600 kids. And then the teachers come up to me and the professors come up and say, my gosh, this is, you know, going to change the way I teach this book. And I can tell with the students, it has changed from an assignment to them to where it's really a lesson and something they're going to take with them. So I didn't intend to write this book, but during the years that I was doing lectures and working with students, and I did a lot of corporate stuff too, because I've been self-employed since I was 19, so I'll get hired for business lectures that have nothing to do with Into the Wild, but Into the Wild's part of my life story, so it always comes up. And I think that, I don't know, I think the truth was so extremely important to Chris. So, you know, there weren't things before said that were dishonest, but there were things that just weren't whole. And so I think it's really important for things to be whole. And I do feel like there'll be a certain peace from that. And, you know, my brothers and sisters have always been sort of, the truth of that has always been swept under the rug a little bit. And I didn't hold the rug up, but Well, I guess I didn't hold the broom, but I held the rug up. You know, I allowed it. I thought I was doing the right thing. And plus, I was very young. I was only 21. And I think that in talking a lot with my brothers and sisters about all of this, there's so much that we hoped would happen. You know, I really felt that it's crazy when so many people from all over the world in different countries send me messages about how much they've learned from Chris's death, how much they've learned about life. But I don't feel that my parents learned anything from his death. And so I guess I wish the two most important people to learn something could, but I can't wait for that anymore. And I see there's too much that people aren't learning. You know, as much as there is that they get from him and this place and everything that he did, which everything he did has little to do with this place, you know. But I think that the way he's inspired me and the way it's affected my life and those things that I can share with people and the way that he's inspired so many people to change their lives. People say a lot. In fact, there's a message in there that says, I came in and you guys were so graciously waiting out here, and I went in and sat for a while, and I cried, and I laid down on the bed, and I stared out the windows a little while, and then I turned over and looked up, and there's somebody scratched in the top of the bus, a message that says, "You changed my life." And that brought me some peace, and it also brings me, you know, Chris can't change anybody's life for them. He can inspire them to change their own lives. You know, he can be the spark that motivates them to ignite themselves, right? But that's really amazing. I mean, that's a powerful thing that so many people connect with his story, that they change their lives for the better. So if I can do something to help more people do that, and to understand him that much more, and if I can do that by telling my own story and how he helped me and the things that he taught me about life, and showing how my brothers and sisters, how we've all come together, you know, through his passing to celebrate his life and all of the things that we've learned about ourselves and ourselves as adults and ourselves as parents, and the things that we hoped would happen within our family that didn't, and what we've learned from that. You know, it's tough. It's really kind of opening up a wound that had healed to a certain point and pouring a bunch of salt in it. But at the end, the salt kills the infection, right? So I think it'll be good. You know, I have faith that it will be. Yeah.
Why do you think so many people connected with Chris's story?
Because I think they find something of their own story in it. You know, it doesn't have to be about going out into the wilderness. Like I said before, it's just a matter of so many people have something they want to do with their life or something they want to change, and there's always a reason they can't do it. You know, whether it's they're stuck in a job or they're stuck in a town or they're stuck in a rut, you know, and they don't kind of see themselves as they are, this going through the motions. I have this one lecture I have called, I hate to say lecture, I just sit and talk with people, but the theme is cage of conformity. And it's all about, if you think you're stuck in this cage of conformity, you're not looking at the door close enough because the lock's on the inside. You know, no one else can open it for you. Only you can do that. So if you want to change something, stop complaining about it. Just get your ass up and do it. And writing this book was really, really hard, but there were things that were troubling me a lot. And so I had to sit down and do the hard work. If I want to change it, then I have to do the work to change it. So I think that seeing how so many people just connect with something in him, I think people, whether they make this hike or whether they come here or whether they're just inspired by his story, I don't think it's so much about them searching for a connection with Chris as it is reconnecting with something they lost in themselves, you know, that they feel is missing. I mean, how can you know it's missing if you haven't, if you don't feel like this gnawing that it's there, or something that you want to do, or something that you want to be? So, I mean, clearly, you know, Chris pushed himself to the limit in following his dreams, and he died doing it. You know, people don't want to honor the fact that he died. They want to honor the fact that he really lived. You know, and they hope that they can do that and make it past 24. Right? And he died at 24, but he lived a full life. You know, he did so much more living in that short time than people do in their old age, because they're kind of living the life that they think they're supposed to, or that someone else has laid out for them, or a path that, and I don't mean that as an insult, it's just something sometimes that happens. I talk to kids all the time, and I say, how many of you have a grandparent that gets up at some ungodly hour every single morning, you know, and their hands always go up and they're laughing, and oh yeah, grandma gets up at 4 a.m. every day and does this or the next thing. And I say it's because they know their time's running out. They got a lot of stuff they still want to do, you know? So, yeah, don't let your time run out. Start now while you can. You know, grandma probably wants to do a hell of a lot more than she can, you know, so do it now while you can. I think it's so cool how Eric and Jen are, who in their right mind has a little baby? How old is Ryan?
You shouldn't ask me that on tape. 21 months?
How old does Jenna know that your son is? Who in their right
20-something.
mind has a 21-month-old and a new baby on the way and says, let's buy an old school bus and change it into a minimalist, simple living house and travel around, you know? And someone in their exact right mind does that, you know, because that's what you want to do. Ryan has hiked more and done more stuff all over this country than most people that live here and are, you know, they've lived here 70 years or something. I mean, I'm guessing, but I'm pretty damn sure that's the truth. You know, I see these pictures, I'm like, that is going to be the coolest kid ever, you know? So, I think it's a great gift that you guys are doing for your kids, and it's because you're being true to yourselves, and that's what you want to do, you know, and so you're teaching that, and your kids might think, oh my God, my parents were crazy. I can't believe that I was raised for a couple years in this bus, and I hated traveling, and I hated, you know, this, that, or the next thing, but they're going to learn that if there's something that they want to do, they can do it. That's what they're going to take from that, you know, and that's huge. That's an amazing gift you give to your children.
How do
You know?
How do you think that Jan Burris and Wayne and other people in the book are going to respond to your book?
I don't know. I don't care, and I mean that in the nicest way, so don't edit that after I don't care. I can't control that. And I did not write this book thinking at all about what anyone else would think about it. I really didn't. I couldn't. You know that. I couldn't have possibly done it. I couldn't have possibly put anything on some of these pages where I left those things on the page if I was worried about what someone else was going to say or think or do. I mean, of course, you always are writing with the reader in mind, obviously, but not because I care about what they think, but because I want to make sure they understand what I'm saying, right? So, yeah, I know that I wrote it with pure intent. And there's going to be people that say, oh my God, why can't she just let her brother die and let the story go? And she's just trying to make money and blah, 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 blah. And I'm sorry, but anyone that has ever had any knowledge about finances ever in their life knows that if I was going to write a book because I just wanted to sell a whole bunch of copies, I might have written it when Into the Wild was selling millions and millions of copies. Mm-hmm. And then maybe when the movie came out, you know, and was getting all that attention, it just was the right time. And I have supported myself since I was 19 just fine, and I'm 42 now, and I didn't have to do this to support myself. But I felt that I had to do this to support the truth and what I thought was right. So, you know, Chris was somebody that I always say, he lived his life not worried about what other people would think of him. He lived his life, you know, wondering what he'd think about himself. And I think that's very rare. And so I try to follow the same values. The decisions that I make, and my life, my parenting, my relationships. I make the best decision I can that I think is the smartest thing for myself and my family, and I do it with pure intent. And are the decisions always the right decisions? No, but you can't learn anything. You know, you learn more from your mistakes than your successes. With more mistakes, you have more successes. So, so yeah, I don't think that much about what anyone else is going to think about it, but I thought a lot about what I was going to think of it. Yeah, and I'm really proud of it. And thank you.
And you should be.
Thank you for helping me do
you
it.
should be. It was. I mean, Carine wrote every word and slaved her butt off for a long time for that book, and it's gonna be great. And I can't wait for you guys to all read it.
But I couldn't have done it without you.
Well, all right, stop. This isn't
I
about.
couldn't
this
have. There's
isn't-
no way.
This isn't about. This
There's
isn't about
no
that.
way.
This is. It's great. It's gonna help a lot of people.
Well, I appreciate that.
Yeah.
So I hope so. That was our goal.
Yeah.
You know, all the good stuff that comes from it, and if it sells a lot of books, is just this awesome affirmation. But the affirmation really comes from the people that say, I learned something from your book, or your book inspired me, or you changed my life. So I can say, no, I didn't. You know, you did that for yourself, and I'm so glad that my book was a vehicle for you to do that.
I think it's gonna change the discussion of domestic violence. And
Well, and
in a
that's
way.
what I want. That is what is so important. And I don't want to speak for my brothers and sisters, but that's what's so important about this. You know, there's 8 of us, 7 living, 6 of us are parents, and all of us have broken that cycle. And that's a hard thing to do. You know, breaking the cycle of domestic violence is something that gets handed down, unfortunately, and it gets handed down because it's kept behind closed doors, and then it remains behind closed doors. And I do think that this will change that.
And what it is ambiguous. You know.
Yeah.
Like it's
What
not,
constitutes domestic violence? Oh, you're not. I
Exactly.
didn't break your bones. You're not in the hospital. You know. I mean, why is there? You know, there's all these campaigns about anti-bullying, and it's so wonderful. And people get on Facebook and you know, share this if you're going to help this 12-year-old that's being bullied in Florida, and all these wonderful people rally, and that's so wonderful because that's a problem. But I never see people rallying at the house down the street over there because they know that that guy's beating his wife, or they know that that woman is hurting her kids. You know, but that's their problem. Oh, God, I hope they fix it. Do you know about that person over there and what's happening? Oh, those poor kids. I sure hope they fix that. But nobody's going over there going, hey, let's rally up and help them. You know, that's not right. You know, it's just another form of bullying. And it's kept secret. In this day and age where nothing is private anymore, you know, it's still so private. So, yeah, that's what I want to do. I want to... John wrote something in his foreword that I thought was really great, and I'm not going to try to quote it because I'll say it wrong, but when I read what he wrote towards the end about dragging out the most toxic secrets and exposing them to light takes away their ability to hurt, something like that. And that's so true, you know? I mean, this has hurt me for so long. It hurt Chris for so long. It brought Chris out here. But I guess writing the book was sort of my, you know, my version of pushing myself to the limit and pushing myself to the extremes and putting myself way out of my comfort zone. Because, you know, it's so cliche to say that the best rewards are at the end of the toughest journeys, but I believe that's true. So, yeah.
I have a lighter question.
My favorite color. Hold on, let me have some more chicken broth.
No, I was just wondering if you've ever made yourself a second name, like his was Supertramp. Have you ever made your own?
Oh, only when I was teasing guys, telling them that I had a lesbian lover in college named Savannah or something like that. You know, because they're, oh, it's so cool. No,
Yeah.
no. I have to say that because any guy friends that I have that would laugh about that. But no, I've never made up another name for myself.
The rain is up.
Yeah, it's coming down. But I understood why Chris did that. You know, I mean, Chris kind of had to invent this whole alternate reality because he wanted to escape that part of his past. But it was also just part of him being melodramatic
Yeah.
and writing Alexander Supertramp.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And he was young and male, you know, and it was.
I think it's cool.
Yeah, so no, but I have never invented another name for myself. I've gotten married many times. Unfortunately, and I've changed my name then, but I'm never doing that again. So other than taking the name of someone else that I was committed to, no, I have not. So, any other questions? Do you have a question, Jeff?
No.
Are you all right?
Yeah. I've been in the smoke, so I'm like,
So not an actual question, but I was just wondering if, I don't know, can you share a story about when you and Chris were together, like something that you and him did together that, I don't know, is a fond memory,
Yeah.
and you wouldn't mind sharing with us?
He would get me out of the house when we really needed to get out of the house, and he would take me running down our streets into Rutherford Park, and it was this. Our neighborhood was built on like an area where there used to be tobacco fields in Virginia, and there were these. I researched it to make sure I got it right in the book, and now I'm gonna have a hard time like saying it exactly right. But there were, like streams for providing water and stuff, and irrigation and
Irrigation dishes?
yeah, and you can still see in our backyard, you could still get up. Our backyard had a rise to it, and you could kind of look down the little valley. Like we thought it was this huge river valley, and look at it today, and it's so small. But you could see where the water used to run, and we used to dig up all kinds of cool stuff in our backyard from stuff that had washed through there, and Chris would just tell me stories. He would talk about these plates that we would find, and he would tell me the story about ancient Chinese armies being out there because they had this Asian theme on them. And so he was constantly inventing stories. He was constantly changing the subject, and, he just taught me to get outside, whether that's outdoors or outside of yourself or your situation. But he was great like that. He would always invent escapes. Yeah. So he was a great protector. He was a really great big brother. But those are the kinds of things that I remember most about him. But I miss him a lot. I wish he was sitting here with us. Maybe not here because there wouldn't be, or else he could be telling us about this epic journey he had here. But I still feel that he's with me all the time. There's a part of me that left with him. And there's the part of me that he took. But I feel like there's a lot of him that's still with me. And I think he watches over me. I do. And my kids. I just get that feeling sometimes. And my brothers and sisters too. Definitely. So. But every time I wish that he was here, I feel selfish about it. I think he earned a really great whatever's next. I don't know anyone. I never personally knew Mother Teresa, Chris is not a saint, and he's not Jesus or anything like that. And sometimes people kind of put him up on this not inhuman place, but he was just really great and cool and honest, and he's a really good guy. So I miss having that around. So you got to do the best. Chris always taught me to do the best you can in the situation you have.
Right.
So he's no longer here in body. I still feel that he's here in spirit. And so I'm going to do the best I can with what he left behind for me. For everyone. So that's what you have to do. Or you go crazy and you get really sad and depressed. And it sucks. So you have to do something else. Is there more chicken broth? Did we
The chicken broth bottle is behind the.
This is how fancy we are.
Sorry.
All right.
I should have brought a box of
I
chicken
know.
broth.
That would have been so much easier putting your backpack. All right. Any other questions in the rain?
The truth will set you free, but it's going to make you mad first.